these brave politicians, as you are right now, saying that you are against any kind of discrimination, that everybody should support Pride and this event?
Listen, it goes without saying. I'm not the politician, per se, but I know what I stand for. I know what my city stands for. I know what my country stands for. It stands for any sort of discrimination. We're all equal. We may have different opinions, but we have to respect each other. And I think that's critical, and that's the way I teach my children as well. I remember, I think it was 2015, 2016, because I did have as a mayor at that time continuous communication with the LGBT population in Belgrade, and they asked me, could you find a space for us, an office, where we can, be present 24/7, where we can, have our activities, communicate, etc. And we managed to do that. And this office is still operational. It's just a couple of blocks away from here. So I really believe, from the bottom of my heart, that it's all about communication, that we are all, we all live in the same city or in the same country or the same continent, and that we should stick together. If you look at the really challenges that the whole world has been experiencing for the last 3 years, COVID, this conflict in Ukraine, energy crisis, all sorts of terrible events that have happened. Come on, the only way for us to overcome those if we stick together, irrespective of the differences. And I think we should respect that I'm different than you, you are different than me in terms of opinions, in terms of the way you dress, etc. But we are still, humans in a way. And I really believe that, and that's why I came here this morning, just to give you the support that you need, but also to show you that yes, Serbia is open, Belgrade is open, and this is the a system of values that we are trying to create and to cherish here in Belgrade.
You mentioned Pride Info Center, and yes, you were the one who helped to find the space and location for it. It's still, as you said, operational. It's the main point of gathering for LGBTI+ community in Belgrade, I would say. But was it hard for you or difficult to make some of these steps in political manner?
For me personally, no, not at all. As a mayor, I make my own decisions. I take consequences of those decisions, and the decision was right. I'm very happy and glad that this Pride Center is still operational, which means that we did something good. If it was to be there for a month or so, then it would be a wrong decision, wrong move. But since it's been there for years now, and since it's been fully operational, I think that was the right thing to do. And again, I always stand by my decisions. So from the political perspective, the goal of this new image of Belgrade was to portray it as an open, cosmopolitan city. I think we managed to do that in the last couple of years, and I think that you guys will just manage to do it as well this year.
You were one of the rare politicians that actually you were checking in the morning. You also mentioned it, but I know that story from the organizers.
Yeah, I was checking it. I was checking the route in the morning just to make sure that everything went well. Listen, it was very important. I mean, just bringing that year back to my memory. 2014. I cannot recall the last time we had the Pride before that. I think it was 2010. 2010. Okay, so 4 years passed, and we just wanted to make sure that everything went well. I was really into it. I just simply wanted to show a different image of Belgrade. Again, the values that I stand for, the values I think most, if not all, people in Belgrade stand for. I simply wanted the world to see it, and I had a great time. I met good people there. I established this line of communication that kind of had the consequences in opening the Pride Center, and a lot of energy, a lot of good vibes, and I think that was the turning point. I really think so, because it was public, it was open, it was with no incidents. It was something that, in a way, put the ship which is called Development of the City of Belgrade of Serbia, in this manner, into the right direction. And we followed it that in 2015, 16, and onwards. So it's probably one of the best decisions that I ever made.
Yeah, and we had 7 or 8 successful and peaceful prides after that, and we all thought that it's gonna change, that the path was already taken, and but we have, as I mentioned, tensions these days, and it kind of surprised us. Were you also surprised by that? Saying that 2014 was a turning point when we had a very peaceful, successful pride that you managed to have as a mayor of Belgrade here in the,
listen,
city.
I told you that even prior to this panel. I do have a feeling that something is happening that neither you or I understand in a proper manner. Not only in Belgrade, but I think in Europe and worldwide. The situation in Ukraine doesn't help. I don't see anyone talking about peace. Everybody talks about war. I feel this, tensions growing for no obvious reason. No one who I talk to can actually explain to me what the problem is. But obviously there are certain groups of people, by far a minority, that have certain interest in creating conflicts. And the only message to you from me is just make sure that you follow the advice in terms of the safety for everybody, because none of us wants to see any bad things happening, if I may express myself that way. But to be very open and direct to you, I really do not know what is going on. I do not know what is going on or why it is going on in the heads of certain people to make any problem again in 2022. So we are not in 2014 or 1990s. We are actually in 2022. World has changed. People have changed. I really had the impression that we moved on in terms of even talking about this. That this became in a way a normal event. Freedom of speech, freedom of movement in a way. I'm not privy to any detailed information that the Minister of Interior has at the moment. So please talk to them. But I just urge you and ask you for to have safety as a priority for all of us.
And it's also important to mention that police actually was the best ally of prides during these years, and that actually you as a mayor established that cooperation and understanding that pride organizers and police have been developing and reached in the previous years.
Well, listen, in 2014, one of the priorities for us was to make sure that everything goes in a safe manner, that was, I think, again, I'll come back to this, the turning point. After that, I don't think we actually had that many police officers on the streets. It was kind of happening on annual basis in a normal manner. We'll see about this year. Again, I really do not know what's going on. I'm not privy to the details, but I just urge all of you to have your safety and the safety of everybody else in mind.
Thank you very much. And at the end, I would really like just to ask you what would be your message. I know that you mentioned a lot of things now to all the guests that are here in Belgrade, also to people from Belgrade who are here, who are listening to us. And what would be your message of empowering them?
Well, listen, my message is the following. Belgrade has changed, and Serbia has changed in the last couple of years during the most difficult times when it comes to economy or economic crisis in the world. We have proven to be able to be winners. And just for you who don't know, I actually said that during this panel. Serbia is the fastest growing economy, or has been for the last 2 years, cumulative in Europe, and it has never been like that. We are opening factories, we are building new bridges, new highways, new schools, new hospitals. So we have really changed. And Serbia has become the leader in Western Balkans region, and we need to maintain that. But it's not about the infrastructure only. It's not about the economy. It's about being human. It's about being open. It's about being anti-discriminatory against any sort of discrimination. So it goes both ways. And I really hope that we're going to prove this year and this time to be as open as as cosmopolitan as we have been for all these years.
And that's something that we should remember, that respect is always a key. And thank you really very much for your support and for being with the Pride from 2014.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I wish you all the best. I'm at your disposal at any point of time. Should you need anything, you can count on me.
Thank you very much, and I hope we see each other on Saturday as well.
Thank you very much.
Now we're just going to make 5 minutes break, and then organizers of previous Prides will be here on the scene.
So, dear all, welcome to the first panel that is more regular after the opening we have. And this is the panel about the history of Belgrade Pride. I learned a lot about the history of different prides around the globe, and of course, at the beginning it was really interesting or difficult in many prides around the globe. But I must say that I never heard such, how say, turbulent period of prides for the very beginning that is now continuing, like this one that we have in Belgrade, but also in the Balkan region, it's quite challenging having pride, and every year it's still, despite successful pride, we still have a lot of discussion about security, safety. We have a lot of homophobia around. We have a problem of understanding stereotypes and prejudice from the society. Things are changing, but comparing to some Western countries, things are changing much not that fast, let's say, or changes are very, very slow. And I think this is the key problem that we have in this region. So we will try to talk about the history, and I guess that all of you know very well how things were in Serbia. So we have about 21 years of the history. So everything started 2001 when activists believed that things change after Milosevic. So when Milosevic fell, we were thinking that things are now, that Belgrade is open for everyone. And then, I have really excellent panelists. Agata is here, someone who was in 2001, and she will give us a very big overview of the situation that was during that period after 2001 and later, and everything what is happening, what she sees from her perspective. I mean, also Joran was here with us at the very beginning when we started having consecutive prides in 2009, where we had attempts to organize all the time, but it was banned and banned again. Kevin was there as well from Toronto. That is quite far away from us, provide us really enormous support during that period, and also he's part of history, and he's back to Belgrade after how many years? 2014 was the last time. Yeah, okay. And Jenny, that is always here with us. Jenny is from Tirana and from Albania. It's also we are sharing this similar problems. I mean, when it comes to police, when it comes to authorities, when it comes to prejudice, stereotypes. I mean, quite different countries, but quite similar problems that we always have, especially when we try to be visible. So this is what we will talk about during today, and of course Jenny was with us here all the time, and she can give us some kind of evaluation, I think. But we will start from Agata. I mean, I think Agata that many of our colleagues here that are coming from different countries, and we have also some people from here. Many of them don't know. I mean, how was 2001? How you felt? Was it really something that was not properly organized by police? What was when 2001 this happened? What was my feeling is that police didn't understand anything, or they were homophobic and they left you on the streets without proper protection. What was actually what's happened at that time? Because what we see in footages is really not something what was inside. You cannot, when you see these several footages when they are attacking, you cannot realize actually, if police decide to leave you and then to beat, or they simply were proper there. And also, what is always interesting, the question I'm getting from journalists and so on, people are always curious to know about perpetrators. Who were the ones who were 2001 attacking? Is it really only church? Is it football supporters? Is it some hooligans that they collect? Who are those who attack you in 2001? I was not there on streets. I was talking to some victims, and what I remember from that, I'm always repeating from some victims that I talked. There was a lot of straight women who were attacked only because they have a short hair, they have piercing, they have tattoo, they have a wrong color of the bag, and so on.
Them, even heteronormative-looking women.
Yeah, please.
I'm not very technically skilled. Yeah. Well, good morning, and thank you all for coming. First of all, I would just to give you some kind of pretext before we decided to organize the Pride in 2001, because it's a long story, like any story, but I'll try to make it as short as possible, is that during the 90s and Milosevic's fascist, omni-oppressive regime, thanks to a letter that we received from Slovenia, which in my opinion and in the opinion of many people has always been the most progressive republic in the former Yugoslavia, we received a letter from one group of activists from over there, and they basically initiated and kind of encouraged us to also organize in Serbia and maybe start some activities and programs and organizations for LGBTIQ people. I have to make one important distinction because at that time, like in the rest of the world, of course, even bisexual people, but especially trans, intersex and queer people were not visible, our identities and our rights, and like in the rest of the world. So, we kind of knew each other, some of us, like for instance, I always unlike, which I think is lacking in our context, in many contexts, I think it is extremely important that all wise people and people of dignity always emphasize the importance of people who have come before us. And so Lepa Mlađenović, Dejan Nebrigić, one of our first and most prominent activists, we were, most of us, working with peace organizations, basically protesting against the war, nationalism, militarism, and all of that was rising and on the increase at that time in former Yugoslavia. Still, because we actually, from Serbia, we have lived in, I think, about 5 countries. It was Yugoslavia, but then another Yugoslavia, then the Union of Serbia and Montenegro, and then Serbia, and so on. So basically, formally, we have lived in many countries since the 90s onwards. And and our principles when we were establishing and founding Arcadia was that Lepa's, Dan's, and mine, because as I said, we already worked with peace organizations and doing everything that we could to stop or at least prevent or protest against the war on the territory of former Yugoslavia, that the principles of Arcadia had to be anti-nationalistic, anti-militaristic, and based on the humanistic and the feminist principles and so on. And as you all, I'm sure, may well know, that LGBTIQ people are very diverse in terms of political beliefs and views and value systems and all of that. So there were different also fractions and all of that. Anyway, to make a longer story short, so during the Milosevic regime, we were persecuted. We were forced to have an interrogation, like, for instance, when we would like to cross the borders. I remember once when I went to Romania to my first LGBT conference that I was the only one who was forced to leave the train, and 10 police officer. There was no electricity at that time at the border, and 10 police officer with flashlights would interrogate me, like many others. And then it also coincided with the death of Dejan Nebrigić, who is our first and the most prominent gay activist at a time. Maybe that also prompted us to kind of, without really open discussion, end the work of Arcadia. To me, also, that was a sad moment, but also there was needed for me to found an organization that was all included. And that's what we did. I, together, of course, with my colleagues, organized Ghent and LGBT. later renamed because the inspiration for the name is Ghent from Ursula Le Guin's, the famous writer, anarchist, and feminist, The Left Hand of Darkness, the world of gender fluid beings and with no history of wars and conflicts. And so Ghent was established, Labris was already established as a lesbian-only organization. And there is this rhetoric that I'm sure you've been all hearing throughout our history, throughout all time. One of the mechanisms of homo, bi, trans, interphobia, it's minimization. Oh, it's not the time for them. It's not important or not socially acceptable enough. There is always time for all minorities and all people's rights. And Goran mentioned the revolution, so-called, on the 5th of October, the fall of Milosevic's regime. The new people, democratically oriented, took power and got in charge. And so we thought that riding on that wave of democratic changes, and also there were promises and announcement that even a new constitution will be possibly adopted in democratic reforms. We thought, well, it's finally also probably that the context has changed a little bit, and that we can organize the first LGBT IQ Pride and so on. And so I remember, I can just tell you even anecdotally that, for instance, we went to register our peaceful assembly and celebration of Pride to the police 4 times. And of course, at that time, we were kind of observed as some kind of exotic animals. That's really how we were treated, with a lot of micro and aggressions and even open aggressions and so on, and with the relevant stakeholders, institutions, and so on. And it was very clear that it was a very extremely high-risk event, that many threats from all kinds of, I would say, clarifascist, nationalist, hooligans with any kind of clear ideology, but just, like that somebody, because this is a very macho, patriarchal, and extremely aggressive mentality in society. So that all those macho, patriarchal hooligans, whether they were like, as you said, football fans or whatever, it's just that traditionally, which has always been perpetuated by the Serbian Orthodox Church, which is one of the pillars, if not the main pillar of this society, that, LGBTIQ, something sick, evil, something that is should be removed from the tradition and so-called values of this society. So what happened? We registered. The Belgrade was basically like plastered. It was the threats on certain posters were all over Belgrade, that we're waiting for you, you're sick, we will kill you, those kind of messages. And on the day of the Pride, the police initially sent out only 4 police people to protect our event, which was estimated as assessed as the event of the highest risk. I understand that even Prime Minister Djindjic, who has been praised as the, one of the most iconic and the most important democratic leader in this country, who was assassinated in 2003, inherited completely corrupt and infrastructure, even in terms of the police and all sectors, institutional sectors and so on. But the fact that only 4 police people came to safeguard the event, and then when we arrived at the Republika Square, of course, Ghent and Labris were organizers, but also other people. I would just say that the majority of people, according to research in 2001, who were brutalized and violated were actually heterosexual people because of the mechanisms of homo, bi, transphobia. Of course, many LGBTQ people were scared to come. It was a, like a huge breakthrough and, revolutionary event without any pretension, but it was. And so what happened, we come to the square, And it was a surreal picture. I'm getting goosebumps right now again because the body always remembers trauma. And there were thousands of them. And so we, right from the start, we were scattered. There were no mobile phones and all of that, so we couldn't really coordinate and communicate with each other. And they, right from the start, started beating us, knocking down people, knocking down women, even heteronormative looking women and men, because I would just like to emphasize that the platform for the development of LGBTIQ movement in Serbia is a feminist platform. And that unlike many other human rights national and international organizations who didn't provide us with any kind of support before, during, and after the Pride, and that lasted for quite a period of time until their agenda have changed, and the motivation for that change is questionable, and maybe we can discuss it. That the many, renowned international human rights organizations and national didn't provide us any kind of support. Of course, there were exceptions like Fund for the Humanitarian Right. You worked with Natasha Kandic at the time for that organizations and some other, I always like to mention people, of course I will forget many, Borka Pavicevic, Center for Decontamination of Culture, very important institution, who's always provided us with all kinds of support and to other minorities. So what happened? Until then they realized that the violence was absolutely escalating and that there was a war on the streets of Belgrade. And then the police, Boško Buha, with whom I had to deal on that day, the head of the police, decided to send more police people. But what was happening? Getting goosebumps again. Unlike what one person who was brutally beaten just said on one TV show and recently, it is absolutely not true. Many of us were still present, and I, as an organizer, thought that it was absolutely my duty, not because I'm a saint or a heroine or a victim, that it was my duty to stay the whole time in the Republika Square and then to head to Student Cultural Center where the other part of the program was supposed to be realized. And so I would just like to point out that I was witnessing there, like forming stampedos and targeting and knocking down women and, all kinds of people. And police people would stand by doing nothing. And I remember urging them, like other, of course, of my comrades, like, do something about it. Don't you see that they're basically killing us? And the answers by those police people were, I will never protect faggots and dykes. So those were their words. And so I also thought that it was my obligation whenever I recognized somebody who was LGBTIQ, I thought it was my responsibility to say, go home. This is really escalating above any imaginable. We were naive. I'll give you that. We were absolutely naive. But we did all in that power, and also ask international organizations to help us to, to protect this event. So we headed to Slavica Stojanovic, Smina Tešanović, Iljana Virjević. We headed to Student Cultural Center. There were shots on the streets of Belgrade, but very important one detail. Police didn't react until the police was attacked. So they basically didn't protect us, but until the police, they started throwing stones and all kinds of stuff at the police, and until that moment, police didn't react, but then when they realized that they were endangered, then they started reacting and fighting with those hooligans, which, it's just a long tradition. Ultra right-wing, clara-nationalist, fascist, and and even people without any ideology, but just that machism one of the characteristics of machism is that you have to mistreat and abuse those who are different and who have less power than you and who are, of course, vulnerable. So we went to the Student Cultural Center. I had to deal with the police, with the journalists, with the staff of the Student Cultural Center who were very scared and very angry. And also I was the only person who had to allow our people, LGBTIQ people and our supporters to enter or not the Student Cultural Center. I was urged to, by Boško Buha, and at some point we came to agreement that we had to cancel the rest of the programs into the Cultural Center. And so basically that was it. And the president of the country back then was not even informed that almost a massacre, that a brutal and very numerous violence happened on the streets of Belgrade. And then I organized a press conference after 4 days at the Center for the Decontamination of Culture. And I'll just maybe stop here and, sorry if I'm talking too long, just, you know, interrupt me, focus me, whatever. Don't want to take up too much time. And what was also, and I write about it, I write about it, that from the whole Serbian and those people who kind of self-indulgently call themselves intellectual elites and artists fighting for freedom, injustice, and so on, that Biljana Srbljanović, my friend, who is our well-renowned writer and professor at the Faculty of Drama Arts, was constantly on the phone with me. And she said to me, I'll just give you this. I'll call all the theaters, all the universities, even the Serbian Academy for Arts and Science. And none of those people who we kind of had expected might at least condemn the violence, no matter the identity, and so on, all of them were silent, except for them. And at that press conference 4 days later, from all those public figures, from the whole of Serbia, from all those public figures, I think about maybe, apart from us activists, that there were only like about 6, 7 of them, and I want to mention their name. Always Vladimir Arsenijević, writer, Biljana Srbljanović, writer, Slađana Milošević, artist, Srbijanka Turajlić, professor, and Borka Pavićević, of course, and so on. There's such a small number of intellectual, you know, for instance, Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, who has always talked, like many other people, of the responsibility of intellectuals and artists to use their platform to point and emphasize and do everything in their power to use their platform to fight against any kind of injustice and violence. As in Martin Luther King said, injustice somewhere is threat to justice everywhere. So that basically happened. And even after the Pride, there was nothing, no kind of protection, support, nothing from our institutions, but also including many non-governmental organizations, as I said, national, international, nothing, no kind of support. So I'll kind of wrap up here, and I hope it's okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Agata. You mentioned police so many times, and we all have some kind of experience with police that is not that nice, let's say. But Joran was police officer for so many years, and he was a member of European LGBTIQ plus association, and in Sweden and in Europe, and was with us so many times here. So, Joran, how do you feel like? Did you feel like when you were in Belgrade, you were regularly police, but in Belgrade you were in some other role. You were participants, and then you see that police here in that period when you were coming don't even know what to do. I mean, it was something new for them, and they were not first properly trained. Now they are much better, I guess, when I'm talking to them, and they know, okay, these are good guys, these are bad guys. But that time it was a little bit confusing, I guess, for them in Belgrade. I mean, there was a lot of stereotypes and prejudice in the previous period. So how did you feel as a police officer who became participant, and then you have other police officers around, and very not confusing situation. It was a lot of pressure on us, not as organizers only, but also as participants. So when you see all those pressure related to security, and everyone was talking only, if this will be safe, or they will beat us, or whatever. How did you feel at that time?
First, I want to say, very pleased to be invited here. And yes, I've been a police officer for around 40 years in Sweden, but I've been also a LGBT activist in the police since 25 years. And I used to say that police should have more acknowledgement about the vulnerability for the LGBT people in the world. They should have more acknowledgement than people in the society. That's why I think police should have learned about this. I've been working a lot in the Swedish police that we should know about this. Then it's also interesting to see what's happening in other countries. The first 3 times, it's my 7th time here in Belgrade, but the first 3 times I was here for the Liberal Party. I was also involved in the committee for the LGBT Liberal Party. So we came down 2012. We got some funding to participate in Eastern Europe. So we went to Budapest, Riga, Prague, and Belgrade. And we was very, very excited to come here to Belgrade and especially march in the parade. But I think one day before the parade, they say we cancel it. We can't protect the parade, so we don't have enough police officers who can protect the parade. That's why it's going to be cancelled. But when it's a football, Croatia against Serbia, then it's 7,000 people, police officer is working. It's no hard to find this all police if it's, then it's more a value they don't want to protect. I've been also, like in Vilnius, I was talking about them. Then the police said in Vilnius, we are ashamed to protect the pride. So they have to take police officers from small cities to protect the pride. So that's why the police have to work with these issues. Like in Sweden, 2002, we asked to march in police uniform at the Stockholm Pride. 99% of the police in Sweden was against this. But with this, we started a change. Today, if you say you are gay in the Swedish police, no one say, oh, so what? Hopefully you can do what you do. So even to be a trans is not an issue anymore. But it's easier because it's very masculine, macho work. It's easier for trans men to be in the police than the trans women have much harder to be in the police force. But like 2016, I was the first time I was here as a police officer. And Goran helped us to meet the police chiefs and everything, and we have a good discussions. And since 2004, we have this European Gay Police Association. And at a conference 2016, it was a Serbian open gay come to this conference. So I met, he was also with this conference, and we talked. And they say, yeah, it's good that we know this, but many said, okay, we have one conference, we have a little bit education, we don't need do so much more. But this issue you have to talk all the time because it's changing. You can see in Sweden now, we had election last Sunday. Over 20% of the population was voting for the very right-wing Swedish Democrats. And maybe if they're going to be in the government, and maybe they're going to have the role as justice, then it's going to be not so good for the police. So you can't stop to fight with these things. But the sad is, because I was here 2019 last time, then I thought it was quite interesting, because then we could march and people could see the march, that we was happy people. And after the march, it was a big stage at the square, and there was speaker, and it was artists singing. I thought, it's going to help. And now they say we're going to cancel the parade again. It's going back again, and I think we have to stop fighting, then go on fighting with these things. But hopefully we can, like you did 2013, have 100 meters to walk. Then we have had a walk, maybe not a parade. But also I want to say that many said to me, why should you have a pride? Why should you do this? I said, you should be very happy that you don't have that. You know, in many countries it was forbidden to be gay. When I started the police academy, I was mental ill, 1978. 79, they changed the law, then I was not mentally ill again. But in some countries, it's still mentally ill. And also I think we fight that we don't want to mentally ill. We don't want to be against the law and everything. We want to change the law. That's why we celebrate this. But many straight people, they have everything, especially if you are a white man, Christian, then you have everything you can ask for. Yeah. Okay, I stop there.
Thank you, Göran. Kevin, I mean, you're from Toronto. I mean, quite far away. First, how you start being connected to Belgrade Pride? I mean, since the very beginning, and you were really great support. I mean, and how, you know, Serbia is a relatively small country. I mean, and why we were interesting for Toronto Pride and everything else. And how do you feel in those years when you were coming quite often here, and you were one of very few? I mean, we didn't at that time. We didn't have so many people who were coming permanently and supporting us. We were really, as Agata mentioned, I mean, not so many people were happy to help us. It was much better than 2001. Number of increased, but people were. I was always criticized that, oh, Goran, only usual suspects are coming to Belgrade. You know, it's not usual suspects, because you are inviting so many people, and you know, there are always the same people who want to show solidarity. And you know, everyone likes to say solidarity, but when we're inviting, okay, oh, I have to go somewhere. I mean, and it is not the time. So, how was your I mean, Canada, Belgrade?
Well, thanks for the question. First, it's a real honor. I can't tell you how happy it is to be back in Belgrade after many years. Well, the reason that I was here in 2013 and 2014, those were the two times that I was here, really transformational years, is someone I had met in Toronto, and it was you, Goran. In 2012, Toronto had a program where at the front of our parade, or near the front of our parade, we held a special position of honor for an international Grand Marshal, which recognized the work of someone working somewhere else in the world in the Pride movement. And in 2012, it was Goran. So, you know, we met, and were really impressed with Goran's work. And then the invitation came before 2013, and I was deeply honored. We were at that time preparing to host World Pride in 2014, and so we were traveling a bit, and I'd been invited to speak at this conference on human rights and the freedom of expression. So of course I took the opportunity to reconnect and to come and to learn more than anything. You know, if it was supportive, then I'm very glad about that, but really for me it was about learning. By the way, I should point out that since then, I've taken on the role of co-chair of the World Pride Committee of Interpride, which is the International Association of Pride Organizers and the licensor of Interpride. And I want to acknowledge my colleagues from Interpride who are here today in the front row. So when I got here, you talk about my feelings, well, wow, it was so clarifying for me because I was caught up in the logistics of producing a very large sort of international event, and it was a very grounding experience, and it was a real privilege to be witness to, probably to this day, the purest, what I consider the purest expression of pride that I've ever witnessed. You know, it captured, I think, the two important aspects of pride, and one is the defiance in 2013. I'll talk about that in a moment. But the other, and I think we tend to forget this, is the joy that comes with pride, and the joy that I witnessed here in 2013 and 2014 has stayed with me. I tell this story to this day very often to people when I'm out and about. But 2013, I'd arrived, spoke at the conference. I've got to say, there's a lesson for other pride organizations about the importance of not just the march and the parades, but the activities of the week during Pride, like this conference. So I was here for a week. I got to know other LGBTI plus community members from around the world, certainly from around Europe, and made relationships. You know, the relationship between me and Goran, brief though it had been, brought me to Belgrade. And then I made more relationships at this conference. So that over the course of the week, I connected, and then, of course, we were warned all through the week, they always cancel it. They always cancel it. You know, the night before, the word comes, they're not going to allow it, and they haven't allowed it for years. And I had a great week, and come Friday night, sure enough, word went out, the parade was canceled the next day. And this is where it was magical for me. People weren't accepting that. The organizers, the people that I had been connecting with through the week, text messages started to go around. I got to mention that in 2001, there were no cell phones, or at least not very many cell phones, and so that opportunity wasn't available. But in 2013, text messages started to go around, and they said, we're going to do it anyway. And we're going to do it tonight. Meet at this location, and we're going to march to the steps of Parliament, and we're going to have Pride. And I admit I was terrified. I'm in a foreign country for me, and one with stories of some brutal violence and oppression against our community. But I wanted to be with my friends that I'd made through the week. So I arrived at the location, and I don't know what the official numbers are, but it was a small group of marchers, maybe 150, 200, I don't know, it's hard to tell. And again, I got there, and there were a handful of police there. Fortunately, they saw their job was to protect us. But because it was a surprise, element of surprise is amazing, the hooligans, the anti-pride activists had not had a chance really to organize. So we had that street, and we marched, and I tell you that the joy and the defiance was just astonishing. People chanted, "Oh, voyez pride, oh, voyez pride," and we marched, and they sang, and they danced, and they hugged, and they kissed, until we got, and they had a big pride flag they were carrying overhead and waving with such pride like I've never seen, and we got to the steps of Parliament, and they laid that flag on the ground, and they literally, with their bodies, lay on the ground and rolled in the flag and cried, and were so full of joy that I came away with images that will never leave me. And then, you know, there were the press conferences that followed. I remember Goran standing and speaking to the press in a cool, professional way, as he always does. That has just never left my mind. Then in 2014, I mean, this is such a study in contrasts. I came again, this time on my own, just because I wanted to be here again. I wasn't officially representing anybody. And the march came, and lo and behold, on the Saturday, it was allowed. And it occurred to me that never would have happened if 2013 hadn't happened, if the organizers who had been building, who had gone through years of disappointment but continued anyway, if they hadn't done that work, 2014 wouldn't happen. And it was a sunny, beautiful Saturday, and this time my amazement was just at the sheer presence of the police who locked down the city core. You couldn't get in without proper credentials, and 1,000 or so people. The mayor was there, dignitaries were there, and it was just a pleasant, wonderful day to march. And we got to the park, and there were some performances, and it was Pride. And the transformation from 2013 to 2014 is something that this community, I think, should be very, very, very proud of. That is your work. That is in the spirit of the Pride movement around the world, and it's still having repercussions to this day as we sit in this room and we anticipate what's going to happen on Saturday. But it is my pleasure to be here with you and on this distinguished panel, and I'm looking forward to spending the rest of the week with you.
Thank you, Kevin. Jenny, you are responsible, I mean, for visibility in Albania. You're the most visible queer person in Albania, but you were with us, I mean, almost not every year, but since the very beginning, let's say. And I think, you know, it's good for you because you can understand the context in the region quite well, all small details, you know, in dialogue with authorities and so on. But it's still, you know, you understand community that is quite similar, have similar problems, agreements, disagreements, and so on. So what is, if you look in these 2 decades, I mean, of Belgrade, how it looks from your perspective, how it looks. We learn together. I will not ask you if you learn something from Belgrade Pride, because I know that we both of us learn from each other, from other people in the region. So let's say we were always learning from more developed prides like Stockholm or Toronto. I mean, but how you see these 2 decades from your perspective? Of course, our relations in Albania and Serbia were always special. And that was always another element when we were inviting from the very beginning our colleagues from Kosovo, Albania, and so on. That was still something exotic. That is, you know, plus you're from these countries, plus you are from queer community, and you know how it was your, you know, how you see our 2 decades of history.
Actually, this panel brought me a lot of memories, like from the first time that I saw the video of 2001, and I was totally terrified, but I was also very inspired by the courage you had in those years to organize Pride. It remembered me the first Pride in Budva, when we were attacked by, I don't know, like a rain of stones, and we were surrounded by many, many hooligans there. I think someone came from Serbia as well to organize, and that was one of the most terrifying situations I've found myself. It remembered me about the second Pride in Podgorica, when we were taken by police cars and sent in a remote area there. It reminded me of the first Pride in Macedonia. Like this, it's interesting to have this kind of journey. You learn a lot, as you said. I've been in activism since I was 21, so we have been growing up with each other. Like we have had a kind of the organizing of Pride, the whole process, not just the walk, has been a process of building a family, you know. I think that the LGBT movements in the Balkan have done what no other movements nor the politicians have ever achieved, has made possible for us to surpass our changes and our conflicts and get all together. And I can really say with proudness that we have managed to be a big LGBTI family and to be there for each other, to learn from each other's experiences. And actually I've never told you this, but in 2017, when we organized the Pride in Albania, for the first time we had some resistance from the police. because the opposition was organizing a huge protest in the country. It was a very problematic political situation. And for the first time, the internationals were afraid to participate in the Pride. And the fact that they said they were showing hesitance to participate made the police, justify and say, if they are afraid, we cannot protect you, we don't know what's going to happen during this protest that the opposition is making. And the Pride was at the same day, at the same time with the protest. The whole media created a huge debate, what is going to happen? Are the protesters attacking the LGBTI community? The Prime Minister was writing to us, maybe it's a good idea to change the date. There are so many other days you can have the Pride. Why should you have it, this day that you have decided? And I said, why did the opposition decide to do the protest at the day that we have the Pride? And all these insecurities and all this debate made me think about Belgrade Parade, and what you always face here and what you always do here. And together with Christy in those times, we met the Vice Minister of Interior, and she said, look, we cannot protect you. And we were hesitant, and we were like, do we really want to put our community in this kind of risk? Like, is this our responsibility? The embassies were meeting us and telling us, maybe you should change the place, you should go and do the walk at the lake. And near the lake it's a zoo, and I told them we are not animals, we are not like entering in cages anymore, and we are not going to have a picnic. We are going to have a Pride, and the purpose of Pride, is to invade public spaces. And I said, if you don't want to come and you don't feel safe, you are welcome not to come, but we are going to do the Pride because Pride is for us to show to Albanian people that we are as much Albanians as them, and we should use the public space as everyone else. And we said to the police that even if we are only two people, me and Christy, like walking yesterday, tomorrow we are going to do it. And then we decided to write on Facebook to the community that the risk level is like this, you should know. We have done these discussions with internationals and with police. Me and Christy, we have decided to walk. If anyone wants to join us and thinks that, we should do this and we should not be afraid by other Albanians that want to protest for their own cause, then join us. And the next morning, when I saw people starting to come to the march, it was so inspiring, and it was a feeling that I always feel here when I come, because only a few hours before the Pride, they decide to protect the Pride, and you always have the courage to continue and to do it. And I think that was something that we got from you and from activists in Serbia, the persistence and the courage and the importance, of being there, doing that, of invading the public space and being that much visible. And for that, I want to thank you. I said this is a story I've never shared before, but I think one of the reasons we were so strong in that moment was because we have learned so much from the courage of each other here. And for me, going and coming to Belgrade Pride, it's always a mission. It's not like going to other prides. I always enjoy, but the fact that what's happening every year here, and it's not stopping for what we are seeing right now, it's it's our duty to be here. It's you know, as I said, we are family. If we are not here for each other, who's going to be here for us? And it's the right moment to show that when we are all together, we can really do it. And I was here in 2013, and for me, that was also one of the most inspiring prides. When just with one text, we organized very fast, and everyone was like crying and hugging and then drinking a lot in the end to surpass the stress and the emotions. And these are the moments I think that an activist lives for. And I'm sure that this Saturday you are going to do what you do best, that is to show the courage and to show to the whole society that we are not going to hesitate. We are continuing to stand up for not only for ourselves, but even more for the ones, the part of the community that is invisible and cannot be there at the Pride. And we are going to show to the government and give them a lecture of democracy as well, and we are gonna show to each other love, as we are the only ones that can show it that way. So I'm sure that we will make it on Saturday.
Thank you, Jenny. Great. And thanks for all support you have for all this year and being with us. But I think we should continue, I mean, with something that is reality at the moment in Belgrade, and that's a part of history. So I would like to switch again to Agata. So yesterday we got a ban. I mean, it doesn't say it's ban, it says like we are not allowed. We are not allowed, which is completely different than bans. Before we have bans, and they say now police is not allowing. So, Agata, do you think that this is, and this is, of course, again, history. I mean, EuroPride for the first time is banned practically. And we know that everything will be fine in the end. We will walk, I mean, regardless if it will be legal or illegal or whatever, but we will definitely walk. So it's not 2009 anymore or 2001 or so on. So things completely changed. But what do you think from your perspective? Is it just a small incident in the history? Because we have 8 Prides that were peaceful, normal, I mean, nothing happened? Or you think that this is change, that we are go back now to some processes that are really negative, that this ban now will be some negative trend, new negative trend here, or you think when EuroPride is finished, that these forces that are threatening us or so on, that everything will be like 2019 and 20, when we were like, there was no, how to say, some public against, some groups that are that much against Pride. And even here, this year, we heard a lot in media, I guess you heard as well, that people, that these extremists are telling, oh, we are not against Pride. That's fine when it's national Pride. But you know, this is EuroPride, and this is something really, oh my God, so many people will come, they will be naked on streets, and you know, so on. So this is something that is now funny, that some of those guys, not all of them, but some of them are saying, no, national Pride you have every year, that's completely fine. But this is something that we are against. So what do you think that will be, because after this historic moment, you think things will again be bad in the future, or you think this is just a small incident? How do you see that?
A lot of questions. And I'm kind of, I really didn't sleep last night, so I hope I will be focused and concentrated as much as I can. So it's a very complex situation, and you presented it, and that's why, you know, I can draw a lot of questions from that and so on. First of all, I would just like to say that I worked, which is a very big step for mine because of my relationship with the institutions in Serbia, that I worked for 6 years for the Republic Ombudsman. On a gender identity, gender equality council and in that department. So it's actually never been really safe. You know what happened in 2009? It was really brutal. And what I would like to say, and I'm very glad that my colleagues who have gotten asylum and in America, Canada, and some other countries, and who were involved in the organizations of those prides, like in 2009, you and I were, and in some later prides, which were banned and so on. That if we wouldn't accept what the police and the institutions of this country were imposing on us, like you said, like for instance, like oh, you know, like we should go and celebrate Pride somewhere, like you know, like on some kind of meadow. I remember that Maida said that, and so on. And in some spaces, in places in the city which really are not appropriate, which also kind of feeds and that kind of narrative. It's okay, but if it's not really too visible and so on, and you cannot really, you know, march in the city center, which I guess belongs to all of us, and so on. So there are really many layers. It has never been safe, because I would get reports, and that many, you know, all those clero-fascist abusers and hooligans and right-wing groups and so on, were actually always trying to organize. I remember even receiving reports like about Stockholm scenario or South African scenario and so on. And that. But we have to really always consider the context. So in 2012, Radical Party, and I have to emphasize that our current president and prime ministers and all of that, that their original party was a Radical Party, and president was also very distinguished leader of the Radical Party during the 90s, and directly responsible for the war and criminal activities that took place in former Yugoslavia. You can find even on YouTube, or there that was removed, that he said in the parliament, Serbian parliament, that for one killed Serb, there will be 100 Muslims killed. So that's the president of Serbia. And then in 2012, and gradually, a fraction of the Radical Party, which always was proposing, advocating, threatening for big Serbia, and expanding the borders and limits of Serbia to Croatia and Bosnia and other parts, basically, you know, extreme nationalists, and chauvinists and so on. So that's the political context that our president has emerged and developed from. So it has never been really safe, but there was a different composition of our government. I would say more liberal, more progressive, and so on. And so during their time, although even during the time when the so-called Democratic Party, which is more progressive and more liberal and more inclusive in terms of minorities, 2009 was again banned, and we were threatened by back then by the police in very I would say subtle but very ominous ways, that basically our lives will be destroyed until if we don't accept their conditions. So, but yes, I would also say that unlike the former mayor and current minister, whatever, and his speech, which is really completely contradictory to something that he had been speaking before and all of that. It's never been really safe, because if you are safeguarded and surrounded always by the police, in 2010 even the army was asked to protect the Pride in 2001. But yes, it was people. But since 2012, when this party, SNS, Serbian Progressive Party, which actually stemmed and developed from the Radical Party, which is extreme right-wing, the situation has been very complex, perplexing, and often absurd, considering that we even got our first gay prime minister. That's how she identifies, and so on. So I mean, definitely this is a retrograde, but there are many factors that need to be factored into this whole situation. That again, the majority of Serbian population, even according to survey, is basically xenophobic. And there is this narrative that always been present in the Serbian public that LGBTIQ is an import from the rotten, decadent West. That's a myth that has been perpetuated by many right-wing politicians, including the Serbian patriarch, the head of the Serbian Orthodox Church, in a very extreme way. I mean, I encourage you to read his statements. This is really, I don't know why the Commissioner for Protection of Equality even hasn't reacted so far, but we all know we don't have independent institutions anymore in Serbia, because this is an authoritarian, totalitarian, partocratic system. All the decisions are made by the presidents of this country, and of course implemented by his prime minister and so on. You can see that schizophrenic situation when she yesterday spoke on this stage and said, well, I also don't have the rights and so on. How she basically is humiliated and mistreated by her own president, who decided that, for instance, our proposal for the law on same-gendered partnership is anti-constitutional. And she said, like, well, I'm legally nothing to my partner and my child and so on. So you can see that schizophrenic situation. But Ana Brnabić is just a servant of this authoritarian, totalitarian, and partocratic system, like many LGBTIQ people are, you know, throughout the world. We've had even in for instance, the Netherlands and many other countries, gay politicians who are extremely anti-migrant, racist, even homophobic, and so on. So that's nothing new. But I think that there are many now, that first of all, that myth, LGBTIQ people are sick. That's basically their argument, that, you know, even, you know, that the science and World Health Organizations and many other organizations, you know, haven't considered that and removed that from their classifications a long time ago. But no, they perpetuate and feed that narrative that we are something sick, that we're something evil, which that's how the patriarch of the church called us nowadays, and so on. So and again, so coming, having a lot of people from abroad also kind of enlarges and fires up that whole narrative that has been omnipresent throughout all this time. And those are one of those myths or prejudices that they based their homo, bi, trans, interphobia throughout all these years. Then the base of President Vučić are those extremists, right-wing, extreme nationalist, and so on. And I think that he has been using them and his agency, his satellites, to do some kind of work that he would like to wash his clean hands out. in order to present him as a democratic leader and how Serbia is progressing in terms of democracy and civil rights and all of that. But basically, you know, his base voters are exactly those people who have been protesting and will protest and on the 17th and you know, throughout all this time and so on. And the only criteria for this government, actually President Vučić, is his personal ratings, gain, benefits, so he can change it that in that kind of schizophrenic way from one minute to another, and especially because he balances between the so-called rotten West that is guilty of all, you know, decadency and you know, like something against the Serbian Orthodox tradition and mentality and so on, and so that's one. But also he also balances in terms of Putin and the Russian politics, and of course we all know how just one segment in one kind of position LGBTIQ people have been in Russia. So, you know, that's also one international factor that I think kind of, you know, is at play. So I think that all of those factors, but I think that this is a retrograde, but also positive, and I'll finish up very, very soon, because LGBTIQ one more time, like in 2001 and many times throughout all these years, have actually exposed and revealed what kind of regime we live under in this country, because there has been this projection, and when it comes to European Union and many other places, yes, this speech by the former mayor before, those myths that we live in some kind of golden age and that Serbia is the most progressive economically, which is absolutely nonsense according to all the relevant research by independent institutions, international, because we don't have any more independent institutions in this country. That is absolutely clear. It's absolutely such a demagoguery and even cynism. But, you know, that's the narrative that they feed the Serbian people. But I think there is something good, because this exposed how the human rights deteriorated, you know, throughout all this time, exposes this regime, and, you know, by facing that, we can then really, together with, you know, the international community, do even something more, you know, in terms of progression of our rights and status in this society.
Thank you, Göran. How do you feel now? I mean, we have this. Yesterday we heard about ban and everything. How do you feel in Belgrade? Do you think that it's a similar question to Agata? Do you feel that we are going in the wrong direction now, starting with the wrong direction, or you think it just happened because it's EuroPride or something? You know, as we mentioned, Russia, war in Ukraine. I mean, do you think that some other impacts, as we feel? But I guess Agata and me are quite subjective. Maybe you're maybe both. You other guys, you're more objective, I guess, from outside. So what do you think? Is it something dangerous what we have yesterday?
But I think it's going back again, because more conservative, they don't want to do this. Once I was in Riga, I think 2007, I took a taxi from the airport to the hotel. Then the taxi driver, he had girls, a prostitute you could buy. Oh, I want her. Which number is her? So it's okay to buy women. Straight men can buy women. It's no problem. You can have a taxi. But that two persons on the same sex having sex, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible. So it's more a lot of sexism also, that women you can buy, but straight men, you're not allowed to discriminate them and everything. It like the pride is against the men. It's the men's word all the time. Like the president here and all other, look in Hungary, look in Poland. It's no problem for them to buy women. But two men who want to have sex with each other, that's wrong, wrong, wrong. It should be wrong to buy a woman. That should be the bad thing. But I think it's sad that they couldn't. When you have this EuroPride, you should hopefully show that, yes, the police, we can handle this and everything. And we know going to be a lot of protests. We're going to have a lot of policemen working, and tell the people that if you shouldn't demonstrate, it shouldn't cost so much money. But to have 10,000 police officers working, it's going to cost a lot of money. But it's more this very right-wing orthodox who make it expensive. Otherwise, it shouldn't be expensive, because we are not a fighter. We are more hugging, dancing, hooligans, soccer games and everything. That's more fighting. So it used to be like in Stockholm Pride, we don't need so many police officers because it's no fighting. But you have a straight people meeting and a lot of straight men and lots of fighting. You need a lot of police officers to protect others. So I think it's sad that we're not allowed to march. But I don't know if the last word have been said yet. Do you think it's going to be?
Gordon, I wonder if, I mean, I can't pretend to know what's going to happen. You might be subjective, but you're also more informed because you live here. What I can say is it's very clear to me how important that it does happen, because yes, we're in the Serbian context, yes, we're in the Balkans, but internationally, one of my colleagues and I just yesterday were talking about globally, even in the rich so-called liberal Western democracies and so on, Pride organizers are more and more having to spend their budgets, their time, their energy, and their resources on security, because in all countries we are facing this reaction globally. So I think this is really a bellwether here in Belgrade, and it's so important because the attacks are happening. I don't want to name countries or cities or communities, but we're seeing fatal attacks on our community, often at Pride events around the world. So, you know, thank you to you and your community for standing firm here, really, I think, on at the forefront of that struggle to prevent the regression you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that this narrative is being fed by the government. Like, I don't think that the Serbian people are so much against EuroPride, because you said they have been getting used with the Pride, you know, and there is no difference. Everyone knows that there is no difference from the national Pride. And I think that if they have the power to feed it, because they control media, they control the whole public discourse, they control the extremist group. Agata said that there are no independent institutions anymore. I think that the government sees the LGBTI movements and maybe the women rights movements, but mostly the LGBT movement, because of this very visible event, as a threat, you know, that they cannot control. This is something they cannot control. They've been trying to control for many years, but you have managed to make them realize that they cannot control you and they cannot control us. And I think that they want to make a point this time, and even though because it's also EuroPride, and this inspiration from other right-wing politicians in other countries, they kind of want to inspire each other and give a point to each other and to the countries they control the whole narrative they want to control. And I think that I don't know how much dangerous it's going to be, and this is the decision that you and the whole team is going to take. But I think that from my point of view, if we give up at this moment, that's going to create a whole step back for the movement in the future. And I think that yesterday we showed that you have a lot of international support, and that's a very good thing. And I think that the eager of the government to enter EU and, to be part of the big European family, it's gonna make them realize at the last moment that they cannot stop us, and we'll do it. Like this is an unstoppable force. They may try to control everything else, but they cannot control a community that is tired, of being kept in a cage, is tired of living in a lie, and we don't have anything to lose. I lost 20 years of my life living in fear, and when I came out publicly in my country, I realized that even if they kill me, even if they beat me, nothing is going to be worse than my first 20 years of life. So that's the point.
We are always getting comments that we are not responsible in Serbia as the LGBTIQ community, and that we are asking for too much, that we are extreme, that we are some kind of extremist. But I will remind you that in 2020, there was a pandemic here. And this is the situation by the law and by international standards when things are extreme from some perspective. You have the security, health, public moral, and so on. So that was the extreme situation, and we say, okay, we will have some problem, but we will not have Pride Walk as such. So we did it. So, and we cancelled, decided as organizers to do it. That was responsible, and we are showing responsibility. This year, when government for the first time, not government, president for the first time actually said that, that it will be banned, we show that we are responsible. We were sitting and trying to have some kind of dialogue, which is not our responsibility as organizers. We should not have dialogue by the law. We are not obliged. We can simply say we are not respecting decision, and we are, we have decision of Constitutional Court, we have decision of European Court on Human Rights, and this is completely illegal, and we will march. But we sit down with the government and we try to find some kind of solution. That was not easy. That was really, really complicated because the starting point was like no walk at all. And our starting point is like there is no pride without walk, which is completely two sides. And we were trying to have a dialogue. In such situations, Agata explained, I mean, this is not easy. In such environment, not to repeat the whole story about how is the situation in Serbia. I mean, it's extremely, extremely complicated. Every request we have is another complication. We want flags, we want around the city, we want this or that. Everything is complicated, despite the fact that we have like some kind of political will as a starting point. So it's complicated, but I want to say that we will definitely march. I mean, there is no other way for us. Maybe in 2009, I'm a lawyer, and in 2009, 2011, 12, 13, that was maybe time where we did Pride within four walls. So we stay instead we did in 2011, we did flash mob in front of Media Center. So we threw the colors on the streets and we were there, but we have Pride within four walls. In 2013, we marched on the midnight. We had a midnight Pride as so on. But I think after that, it's absolutely impossible for us to stay within four walls and to respect the decision that is absolutely illegal. So that's something we cannot as organizers do it. When it comes to security, that's a big mystery. I was asking, I think, 100 times in media this year, and that was I was asking for previous years as well, but this year really even more. I'm asking, okay, if security is a problem in Belgrade, tell us who are those groups who are threatening security. Tell us who are they. Are they football hooligans? Well, not sure, because they are well controlled when it's needed for some international match. They are very, very well controlled. Okay, the next one. Some extremist group, we have Leviathan, before we have Obraz. Those extremist groups are 30, 50 people, so on. I mean, last year we had one of the events here very close by, on the opposite side of the street, when we have a Pride Forum, and they have the premises we didn't know. They have premises in the same building. When the hub was. So they came with something, they destroyed one backdrop, and that's what they did. But they can be easily controlled by security service and by police. So the next one, who are religious groups? I mean, I'm not sure that those religious groups with kids and so on will come to beat someone and so on. They are protesting, they are against, they are very, very vocal, they are using hate speech. That's for sure. But I'm not sure that they are coming that injure people. So my key question to the government was all the time, who is the threat to security? And we don't have answer on that yet. We never have during the previous years. We never have, that's why I asked Agata at the beginning how we start. Who was in 2001? Who are? And that was a strange mixture. That was very maybe hard to control and, different people. But now everything is very structured in this even protest against EuroPride that we have. So, and the next question, and I finished with that, for the government was like, okay, if this group exists, who will threaten? What you did? What prosecutor office and police did? Did you discover some plan? No. Did you arrest someone? No. Did you do some work that will really help us or say, okay, you are doing great work, but you cannot do. You are doing really, really a lot, but it's such a big threat to us, so you can do beyond that limit. No, we don't have any answer that is like sufficient for us to say that there is a really threat to security. Also, what we hear, Belgrade is a small city. I mean, okay, Stockholm big, but we know each other. We know police officers know us, and we communicate. And we know that there is no real threat. And that's really why it is in the public sphere. I will leave, to all of us to analyze in the coming period. But I think this is this is an episode in our history. I'm absolutely sure that this year we will work, and we work any other year. So we will not stop. And I think it's not possible on a long run to go back to 2009 or let's say 11 or so on. Of course, there will be attempts of some group that will protest. Yesterday we have in front of Dom Omladine here, in front of Pride House, some protesters that are saying. Those protests are same in many European countries. We have religious groups that are against. It's a Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, from my perspective, it's hate speech. But this is something that if it's peaceful, what you can do. So this is not threat. Those groups are not threat to security. But you see, 3 people, or 5 of them, were in front of this Pride House. But then we have like 200 police officers for that. I mean, this is we are always every year complaining to police that we are overprotected, that they are sending too much police protection. And I'm absolutely sure in the world there will be a lot of police and that will provide sufficient protection. But then the next story for the next panel is if this is freedom, if all those police officers around us. Comparing to the preparatory work that should be done before the event. So I'm stopping here. We have a short break now, and then we continue at 11:30 with a new panel. Thank you all.
Test 1, 2, 3. Dobar dan i dobrodošli.
So welcome everybody. I'm very happy to be able to address 2 more minutes. Okay, you get 2 more minutes, but in the meantime, everybody please come in and take a seat, and then we'll give the floor 2 more minutes for the interview. So re-welcome everybody again. Before we start the panel, I would like to welcome her Honorable President, the President of the Belgian Senate, Stina Finidos.
Hi. Good morning. Good morning, dear friends. Good morning, Remy. And Remy, we were talking yesterday to one another, and you asked me why I was here, remember? And I felt it very important to be here because, of course, I want to support Pride wherever I can, but I also want to share a story with you. And it is a story that happened a few months ago in my hometown, Ghent. Ghent, I don't know if you know it, it is in Belgium. And there was a new bar opened. And the owners called it the smallest gay bar in the world. And it was a tiny townhouse. It was only a couple of square meters. And gay should not be understood in the modern sense of the word as in homosexual, but rather in its medieval sense, in the sense of joyful, carefree, bright and happy, the smallest gay bar in the world. And in this bar, you could drink a cocktail, but there was also karaoke. You could play bingo, or you could visit a dark room. And yeah, there were glory holes. So the whole bar was a mishmash of all conceivable ways of living. There was something for everybody, but there was no clear perceivable team. No specific group was catered to. And so if you walked around this bar, you could find a little corner where you would feel comfortable. But the entire time you would be there, you would be confronted with people living a very different life than yours, with a very different way of expressing themselves. So in this bar, it didn't matter which clothes you wore, what color your hair was, or how you expressed yourself sexually. Everyone was welcome, as long as you yourself, of course, didn't exclude anybody else. So on this bar, of course, was a special thing. It was a part of a festival for contemporary arts called the Ghent International Festival. And it ran for a couple of weeks, and the festival intended to color outside the lines. It's an effort to show the diversity in our society. And so what interested me the most is how in Ghent, nobody really cared. It would have been very easy to predict some conservative outrage, some parents that were shocked, that were fearing the moral integrity of their children when they were playing karaoke and saw the glory holes. But no, none of that. In Ghent, we have reached a stage where a project celebrating diversity by integrating all ways of life has become very, very normal. And I am immensely proud to live in a city where this is possible, because I am all too aware how unique this is. And for decades, we have fought in Belgium to create a society where everybody can be themselves, where you can love whoever you love, where you can marry whoever you want, and where you can express your love, in public or in private, in any way you want, without any sorrow. So I'm very proud to say that in Belgium we have been frontrunners. We have been the second one to make same-sex marriage possible. We were the second country in the world to allow adoption by same-sex couples. We had laws acknowledging transsexual people since 2008, and we keep on modernizing and liberalizing them. Today, we are proud to hold the third place on the ILGA's Europe list of countries who are most friendly to the rainbow community. And it is because of all these efforts, all these things we did, that I become so enraged when I see some political groups in some European countries to go to the opposite direction. Countries who have often made great progress in the past, but now who have fallen victim to conservative and, let's say, extreme right politicians trying to make advantage of the rainbow community. They marginalize us. They marginalize the community. They want to erase us. And we see this happening all over Europe. And these are politicians who benefit from polarization. They need an imaginary enemy because their own political platform is too weak to stand on its own. And the sad reality is that the fast paces by which our current society moves forward, it has been enabling politicians like these. They abuse a society in which people are figuring out who they are and who they can be. New identities, new ways of living together, or new ways to present yourself to the world, or of course a logical consequence of a society in which people use individual freedom to their own benefits. But we have to be honest, dear friends, it also creates confusion. You have may noticed that during this speech, I always use the word rainbow community and not LGBTQI+ community. And I choose to do so because I have noticed that too many people simply can't keep up by the rapid pace which these letters and these terminologies are changing. And it is, of course, a very normal reaction that when things are changing quickly, or maybe too quickly, people get scared. They get frustrated because they don't understand anymore. So I believe it is our responsibility as politicians, as activists, to make sure that everybody can keep up. Rainbow community is, in my opinion, an accessible way of explaining to all generations, to all people that are afraid that some people in our world are queer, but that they are an integral part of our society that has always been like this and that will never go away. So this is also why Pride is important and so important. Pride is a way to celebrate and show diversity. And so even in Belgium, people know that I'm a very strong believer in rainbow rights. And some friends of mine still ask me, Stephanie, but is Pride really necessary? And to my friends and enemies, I say, as long as verbal harassment, physical threats, or even, of course, physical violence remains a reality, as long as suicide rates in the European rainbow community remain higher, much higher than the broader population, as long as acceptance of sexuality remains difficult in certain and in many communities and regions, as long as elderly people go back into the closet when they enter a retirement community, then we still need to march. We need to show that that there's nothing abnormal about love, and we need to show we are proud. And today we are here to discuss. Today we are here to act together. So I talked to you about the smallest gay bar in the world, in Ghent. Let's today objective be to find ways to make Europe the biggest gay bar in the world. A joyful, carefree, bright and happy place where everyone can be themselves, no matter who you want to be. I look forward to discussing this with you, and this is why, Remy, why I am here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephanie, and I'm looking forward to discuss everything that you have mentioned during our panel. Before we go to our panel, I am going to introduce and give the floor for his opening remarks to Alexander Stutzman, who is, until yesterday, the special advisor to the presidency of the UN General Assembly, and is now working with the European External Action Service and has been working on human rights issues within the European Parliament for many, many years.
Thank you, Remy, and thank you, Madam President Stephanie, for sharing this beautiful story and also for sharing your hope for a better future for the whole rainbow community, wherever that is. I came here in this very same room yesterday at the same time as your Prime Minister arrived in this room, and I think that was exactly the right moment to come in and to get the feeling of what was going on and what is going on in Belgrade these days, and not only these days. I was coming straight from New York, which of course has a different context and a different reality, and I guess the discussion today would also be an opportunity for us to exchange on how we go through and live in different realities, but nevertheless what brings us together is that we are all human beings and we all aspire to the same, which is to be able to enjoy our fundamental rights in a free way. And these rights are universal, and wherever we are, these rights should be protected, and we should be in a position to actually live the way we want in our diversity with our differences. I wanted to say from the outset, first of all, thanks to the organizers, thanks to Goran and his team for not only inviting me, but for holding through over the last few weeks especially, and making it possible together with all of you for this to happen today, for the Pride to take place. I mean, Pride is of course the Pride March, and I guess You can see some examples here. I didn't know they would choose that picture, but I'm actually very happy they choose that picture of me. That was last June in New York for the UN, for the New York Gay Pride, and it was with the UN core group that we were marching. So that shows that this is also normality. Normality is not just those who try to ban and to hide us and to let that not happen. No, normality is also this. So I just wanted to say from the outset, and this was a little, before we get into the discussion, but a little bit of my mixed feelings when I came here yesterday. I had also an interesting conversation, the always interesting conversation with taxi drivers who was wondering what I was doing in Belgrade. And I think it's always good also to hear what people think about Pride. And it was a young man, and he was not negative about it, but I could sense there was a lot of maybe incomprehension about what was going on, and a lot also of misperceptions, which of course might be the result of those who want to depict us as dangerous or as different or bad, or but also, I mean, maybe sometimes some of the behaviors that we as community might not exactly come across the way we expect to come across. And I think one thing is very clear: LGBTIQ rights are human rights, and this is probably where we are safe if we promote that kind of language. I think you will, I mean, as Petra de Sutter was saying yesterday, you will never generate hate by being kind and explaining what is happening. Now that, of course, sometimes also requires that we give it a push and that we stand very firm on our principles, which I think was very clear in the debate yesterday. And I think you all showed it very clearly where you're not ready to let loose, and this is important. But on the other hand, it's also important, I think, not to provoke or not to provoke in a not unconstructive way, not to hurt feelings of others. It's always better to dialogue and to explain. And I think this is also what Pride is. Pride is not just one moment a year. Pride is the whole year. There are highlights. Pride Month is a highlight. Events like the one this week, EuroPride, is a highlight. And it's great to be in Belgrade for this. I mean, it was said yesterday, it's the first time in the region. It's symbolic. But on the other hand, it's something that we do in our behavior every day when we engage with others. It's important to engage, to explain what we do, who we are, why we do it this way. And that brings progressively, it builds up on empathy and on understanding. Again, standing firm on principles, that's very clear. But it's very often depicted, and those guys out there are very good at this, as trying to construct an image of what the rainbow community is not. This is not an East versus West thing. Pride, being gay, being homosexual, it's not, first of all, it was said yesterday, I mean, it's not a choice, you live with it. And I mean, the whole point is to be able to live with it with others. It's not an East thing or a West thing. It's not a thing of being right-wing or left-wing from the political spectrum. And I think there are more and more examples, and Belgium will show it, where the right-wing and the left-wing can totally agree on promoting and defending LGBTIQ rights. It's not even a thing in favor or against religion. We all know, I guess, I do, a number of gay people or LGBTIQ people who are actually practicing Catholics. I guess they're practicing Orthodox who are gay as well. You have people in the church, whatever church that is, who also accept the fact of being gay. So again, those who try to say this is against this or that doesn't work. So I think this is also where we can concentrate our efforts in order to make that happen. Now, today we're going to talk about the example of Belgium and expand this to European Union, the wider scope of the international arena. United Nations is one example of that. Belgium is in a model, and I think we will see this. It's not a perfect case, but it is a case that allows for a certain number of things where we aspire to happen. I lived in Belgium for 18 years. I feel a little bit Belgian, although I'm not Belgian, so I'm very happy to be together with you, Stephanie, on this panel. But Belgium was the country that allowed me to marry the man I loved, which I could not have done everywhere in the European Union. I could have done it in my own country, France, but I couldn't have done it in my husband's country, which is Italy. So that also shows that as much as we say this is a Western thing, there's still some progress to be made also in the West. However, I guess the example, and I hope we can engage in this very active discussion today, and it's great to have politicians who take the floor on this. I think it's important that those who can raise their voice for the matter do so, that we can go through that interactive discussion today, and I'm really very much looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. So maybe to start the panel, I will also quickly introduce myself. So I am Remy Bonny. I work with an organization, a rather new organization, a Belgium-based organization, Forbidden Colors. We focus on the intersection between the fight for LGBTIQ plus equality in Europe and democratic security. So we do monitoring and advocacy on the backlashes that we have seen, for instance, in Hungary and Poland. We've been doing research on how Russian oligarchs have been behind anti-LGBTQ campaigns inside the European Union and so on. So these are the kind of issues that we work on. Yes, so the panel of today is called Case Study from the West. Does the EU ensure equality, diversity and inclusion? We will be specifically looking into Belgium, but indeed I also want to make the case that, I mean, although Belgium has a very nasty history when it comes to colonialism, we're not here to sell a colonial story. Belgium is to some extent an example for the world. Legally speaking, we're the third in the ILGA Europe Index. At this moment, until last year we were second. It's not because we are doing worse, but other countries are doing better this time. So, I mean, somehow we should be happy about that. And yes, we have marriage equality since 2003, we have adoption since 2006, we have legal gender changes since 2007, but at the same time, while legally we might be one of the best in the world, in Belgium, there is, if it comes to working with populations, still a lot to do. I wanted to address a few numbers of an opinion research that has been done last month because of the organization of EuroPride, the largest Belgian newspaper, found out that 1 out of 4 LGBTIQ plus Belgians has endured physical violence. 73% finds that you should be able to have the gender that you want. Only 40% would directly support their kids coming out as trans. 1 out of 4 believes that the acceptance of trans persons in Belgium is going too far. So just these numbers also shows that not the entire population is still with us. And there is still a lot of work to do. And that's where I want to come with my first question to you, Stephanie. Is indeed Belgium has made a lot of progress, but there is still a lot of work to do, and the federal government has announced for Idaho last May that there is a new federal LGBTIQ plus action plan. You organized also in the Belgian Senate a gathering where you invited the umbrella organizations from Belgium to speak with you and the Prime Minister and so on. Maybe you can explain a little bit more what Belgium is planning in the future, because we know where Belgium stands today, but it would be nice also to look to the future.
Yeah, thank you, Remy. Yes, as you said, we already took major steps in Belgium, but I guess we still have 2 bigger issues to elaborate. And the first issue is, of course, on the legal point of view. On the legal point of view, now we are working on certain laws, like gender identity, like laws for intersex persons. And in that matter, I just want to say that it's not only because of politicians that we make progress. It is the guys behind the screens that tap on the shoulders from politicians, as you activists like Yves, who's sitting over there from the Rainbow House in my country, who's like yesterday evening tapping my shoulder and saying, Stephanie, this and this and this has to be done. So it is so important that we work together, that I know what to do in the parliament. So the first thing we have to do is we have to make another step forward on the legal part. And it's not that easy. It is more easy to allow same-sex marriage, I guess, than to talk about gender identity. Because in that way you have different kind of feelings, like the groups regarding on female rights are a bit concerned on that. If they say, well, if you don't longer express yourself as male or female, how can we work on quota? So it is a difficult discussion, but it is a discussion that we need to do together. And it is, because if it is a difficult discussion, we cannot say, well, we won't do it. So in the legal part, we still have large steps to take. Second, we have to do is on the security part. You said, Remy, there are still a lot of people who get violated, even physical. But the first thing that I always wonder about is that there are so few people that really put a complaint. People say, well, it happened and let's move on. I won't go to the police because they will laugh, they won't have time for me, blah, blah, blah. So if we want really numbers to be correct, if we really want to monitor, we really need numbers. And so it means you all have to take complaint. And this is why I took on a resolution in the Senate that it would be possible to make an anonymous complaint. It is not that easy to implement that, but we are still working. And then a third thing I want to say is that we still have to work on the minds of people, even in Belgium. Even in Belgium, where we are a front runner, the minds of the people are still not in that way that we want. You know, I will tell you a personal story. My best friend, he's gay, and he came out of the closet when he was 18, and his parents were very angry, and they told him to leave the house. And he was my best friend, and he came to our house, where my parents took him into our house, and he's like the brother I never had. He still is. And he's been married now for 15 years, and last month he told me that 10 years ago he was feeling very quite at ease when he walked around with his husband holding hands. And now 10 years later he feels that it's changed a bit. He gets more looks than 10 years ago. So if I hear that, it makes me wonder, and I'm very anxious on hearing that. And I look around and I hear a lot of the same stories, also in my country, in Belgium. So it means that there is a part of the population who's not with us, who's afraid, like here in Serbia. So because of that, I think it's very important that I'm also here to learn from you and to see how you are dealing with community and population, because it's one thing to have the politicians with you, with the support, of course, from the rainbow houses, but also the people. Voilà. And this was a very long answer. I'm sorry.
Well, we have more or less an hour, so I don't mind. So yeah, basically, yes, indeed, we are here also to learn from you, and that's also what I'm going to do with you. I want to make it as interactive as possible. I should have said it in my introduction, but I'm going to divide this panel into 3 blocks. So the first part now we're discussing about Belgium, then we're going to talk about the role of Belgium in Europe, how Belgium can support you, and then we're going to talk about the EU. And maybe before we go to the first round of questions and comments and your involvement, another question for you, Stephanie. You are not just the president of the Belgian Senate, but you are also a member of the Flemish Parliament, one of the regional parliaments that we have, the many regional parliaments that we have in Belgium. In the Flemish Parliament, over the years, there has been an informal group of members of parliament from all ranges of political colors, from left wing to right wing, who actually are working together. And I would dare to say, and that's maybe the best lesson that we can give here today, is that in Belgium LGBTIQ plus rights have become extremely depolarized. While in a lot of other European countries, the polarization about the topics of the fight of LGBTIQ plus equality are extremely polarized. So maybe you can explain a little bit on how this depolarization polarization, especially in the Flemish Parliament, and this cooperation between left-wing to right-wing parties established, basically.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see how our group evolved. So, of course, I'm a member of the Flemish Parliament because the Senate is not directly elected anymore in Belgium. That's why I'm a senator. But my main job still remains in the Flemish Parliament, where I'm, of course, I'm working on equality in my commission. So in this commission, we are, of course, different politicians from different parties, and as you said, from extreme left to extreme right. But you're always confronted with the fact that you work together as friends. There's not a big of a hustle on the two of us or on the different parties there are. We are just looking for solutions. And someday we found each other all at the Pride, because in Belgium and at the biggest Pride we have in Antwerp, we have all the different trucks, and every political party has its own truck. So then we are going in the parade, all with our trucks, and all of a sudden, after the parade, we found ourselves all together at the same party. It was very nice to see. And then we thought, well, we get along so well. We are quite friends, so why don't we work together on an informal group? When we have topics to the schedule, let's discuss it. And so we could make bigger progress if, like, a resolution is not coming from one political party, but from all the political parties in the parliament. Let's say that the government hasn't got a lot of choice then to implement the resolution. And so this is the reason how we started working. And so it's very fluid. It's very fluid. One time I take the initiative to come together, another time my colleague from the Green Party does that. And so we also have activities together, because like I'm the president of the Rainbow Network in my party and the Liberal Party. It's called Out of the Blue. And so has everybody in his own party, and we do some activities together, we do walks together. So we join our efforts, and it works like crazy. So I don't know in which way it got non-political anymore. I think it's a combination of friendship, and it's the combination on working on the same subject and having no differences about it. Of course, we all see it at a certain point of view, but by dialogue, we try to come to a certain level where we can cooperate. And of course, we know that certain politicians and certain political parties have their things that are sensitive, but we try to find a way to work around it. So it's quite special, I guess.
I think your example of how it worked from the Flemish Parliament, I mean, gathering, converging views across the political boundaries, it's an interesting process, which of course doesn't happen from one day to another. It required a few prides where you realized that you were actually marching for the same stuff, and suddenly it's like, but why don't we join forces? I saw a similar experience a little bit in the European Parliament, which is the institution where I'm still a civil servant in the European Parliament formally, and been dealing with human rights in the Parliament. Obviously, LGBTIQ issues did pop up, and this is where I saw over the last 20 years a real evolution also in terms of more convergence between political groups when it comes to LGBTIQ issues. It used to be, I remember 20 years ago, very much something which was high on the agenda for the left-wing parties, the Greens, maybe the smaller parties from the center left and left, much less an agenda item for the center right or for the Christian Democrats, for instance. And the LGBTIQ intergroup, as it's called, I mean the informal caucus, which is also participating in this EuroPride, they will arrive from Strasbourg, where they're currently in the plenary session. It's the State of the Union speech this morning, so they will arrive as of tomorrow afternoon. And there will be a certain number of members of the European Parliament here, and I guess participating in the conference on the closing day.
But what the evolution that we saw over the last 20 years is that now, and I think the last example was, you probably all saw the letter that was widely published, which was signed by 144 members of the European Parliament to the president of this country to ask him to keep the EuroPride program as scheduled. When you look at the names and the composition, you'll see that it goes across the political spectrum, which is something which is really new. So it took 20 years, clearly, to get to that level. Probably even 5 years ago, we would have been in a situation where we would have had maybe 20, 30, 40 names, not 144, clearly not, and it would have been a majority coming from the center left. So this is a new progress that also shows that what was meant or perceived as a not normal issue in the past has now become something which is on the agenda of everybody across the political spectrum. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I think indeed the intergroup and the European Parliament is a very good example, and the European Parliament has a tradition of more formally having these intergroups. The LGBTI one is actually the biggest one in the entire European Parliament. So also on the European level we see that we are able to gather a lot of support, although that I must say, in comparison with what we see in Belgium, there are way less EPP, Christian Democrats supporting the intergroup in the European Parliament, and even more interestingly, ECR, the Conservatives, where the Polish Conservative Party is the main partner in that fraction. We also have a Belgian partner in there, and also in Belgium, for instance, they. When you work together in the informal group in the Flemish Parliament, they are also one of the big partners in there. And that's interesting to see because, of course, we have seen everything that has happened in Poland. And the Flemish nationalists work a lot together on a European level with their Polish counterparts. But if when they come to Belgium, somehow they can find a compromise. I'm a bit sad that they don't have a representative here because they were planned to have one here as well. So anyway, then I cannot ask the question, but I will open up the floor to you. Are there already any questions, especially regarding Belgium? Because the next subject we're going to look more internationally, but are there already any questions or comments regarding this part of the conversation? You don't have to be shy. If not, there. Yeah. Okay. I think the microphone is there. Yes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Floris. I work at the Dutch embassy. I wanted to ask the President of the Senate. In the Netherlands, we see a different political acceptance between LGBT rights and trans rights and bigger questions about gender identity, where you see a political divide. The first 3 letters are not the topic of discussion anymore. We also have most political parties represented at the Canal Parade in Amsterdam, but somehow that is still a polarizing issue. So is that something that was the case in the past in Belgium as well, or how is there a divide?
I understand what you were saying, and it was, let's say, a discussion in the past, but it was a discussion. And it was just a way of not understanding. Now we are making progress because we have very important ambassadors like trans people who are talking about what they are having, they're talking about the operations they have to come through, and because of dialogue, there is not a big of an issue anymore. But of course, I cannot talk about for 11 million Belgian people. Still, there are, I can imagine, in certain, on the country, in certain bars where there will be things said that we never want to hear. But I have to say, on the majority part, people are like, okay, what's the problem? So, but we had to make this progress as well. And we were very lucky to have some great ambassadors, trans people, also great doctors who told us about the operation that they went through, and so on and so on. So the biggest issue right now in Belgium is how to handle intersex. This is quite of a different and difficult debate, because there you have to face the scientific parts and you have to talk with the doctors what to do when a child is born as an intersex. And what now we want to have, that when we want to find a majority, let's say that we are not there yet, that a doctor can do all the things necessary to be healthy, but at a certain point of time, the child or the young adult can decide which gender he wants to have, male, female, or doesn't matter. He or she wants to be fluid. So this is like, let's say, the next discussion we will have, and it's not a political discussion. I think it's more now a medical discussion. On which decision you take on which part of a life. So, yeah, but let's say on transsexual parts, I hope and I think it's over.
I think there is one more hand over there, yes.
Hello. I'd like to ask two brief questions. One, is there the general universal backlash problem in Belgium as well as to the so-called trans-exclusionary radical feminists? Is there such a wave in Belgian society? And also, I would like to make a comment and a question. Homosexuality and lesbianship and bisexuality and transgender were all issues that were highly medicalized in the past, as we all know. It was left up to doctors, and the doctors were not very much in favor of our community. So what makes us think that doctors are going to be making the right decisions when it comes to intersex people? Wouldn't it be rather better to listen to intersex activists rather than doctors? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, first, I totally agree. But this is now the discussion we have in the government. Because when the government wants to take legislation, they have to have the advice from a certain board, of course. And of course, it is the politicians at the end who make the decision, but certain politicians, of course, they think it's very difficult to put the advice from certain doctors and to put it away. So then we have me to say, let's not do that. Let's listen to people who are activating for that, of course. And the first question again was, you were talking about trans.
Yes, on trans-exclusionary movements.
Well, I have to say, in my opinion, we don't have. Like I said before, we have a discussion with feminist, or let's say female groups, that I understand, that I of course understand. I'm the result of quota in politics. You know, if there wasn't quota, I don't think I would be in parliament. So, well, it is for the feminist group a way on how to see how many females there are in parliament, but even that discussion can be solved in the way that you can be expressing yourself and that you can choose your identity as well. It is not that difficult, I think, to solve that, but still we have to have a dialogue. But really on the extremist part, no, luckily not. We have, of course, extremist parties in my country who are not so fond of the fact. But on the other hand, I have to say that it is called Vlaams Belang in my country, the extreme rights. There are some people in Vlaams Belang who said before it is abnormal to be gay, it is abnormal to be transsexual, but they were quickly told they were quickly pushed back to have not longer these sayings again. And also the head of the parliamentary group from Vlaams Belang in the Flemish Parliament is gay as well. So it means, of course, I don't agree with their visions and their opinions, but it means also in Belgium they are taking steps forward, and people who are really extremist in their party are putting against the wall, and they must change their vision and they must change their opinion. But I guess as well in these kinds of party, they also try to change and they also try to evolve, not as quickly as we did, not as quickly as the other political parties did, but I also hope and think they are taking steps forward. And
Thank you very much.
If I just may say, the only thing that I hate is that they try it as well as a religious argument. They are against Islam. I will now say it very easy, and it's not that easy. They are against Islam. Islam is against LGBTQI+, so we are together with LGBTQI. That's the reasoning they take. I don't think that's very generous to Islamic people, but I think this is the way why they are together fighting with us.
I'm very happy that you made that comment because I was going to say the same. Quickly to add, of course, also in Belgium, we see that there is an anti-gender movement, as we see it everywhere in Europe, which is mainly active in Brussels, trying to influence European institutions and so on. We see it to some extent also in the fringes existing in Flanders and in Wallonia, but it's not to the same extent as we see it in other parts in Europe. It's not to the same extent even as we see it in countries like France or the Netherlands. It has probably something to do with the fact that we are a very divided country with two regions, and it takes a lot of effort for these very internationally hierarchical, organized anti-gender movements to focus on two small separate regions. And that's probably the reason why they put more effort in the Netherlands and France than us. But I mean, it's interesting to see that although that's all around us, this is still existing, it's also not really having any impact, especially in Belgium.
So in this way, the difficult political situation is an advantage.
Yeah, or maybe it's also because Belgium isn't that much of a fertile ground, not just because of the division of different communities, but also because of the evolution of Belgium over the last 20 years, where these ideas just don't have a space anymore in that sense. And I guess this is where your second question is interesting, in how legislation is made. And this is, I would say, the advantage and the beauty of a democratic system, is that when it comes to a law and when Parliament does its job, the more informed and the more it takes the views on board of everyone, whether it's the medical advice, but also, I mean, the activists and activists are also there to show what the outside world is thinking, what citizens want. And I think that the secret of something that holds is when legislation is there as a guarantee, but also is not just imposed from in a top-down perspective, but is the result also of a change, of a shift within society and mentalities. Because I mean, as we saw and as we see regularly lately in the US, we saw that with the decision of the Supreme Court. When you think legislation is there, it's never taken for granted, and it only can stay there if it roots and builds on a feeling which is widely shared in society. I mean, you said it, Stephanie. We lost some people, which is true. So I think that the thing is how to get them on board in the first place. And then in that sense, maybe the anti-gender people have a more difficult task in a society that is more cohesive in that perspective.
In the meantime, I would like the microphone to go to Yves, who should also have been on this panel, actually, because he is the director of one of the umbrella organizations. While Yves is getting the microphone, I want to give you one example of what happened a few weeks ago in Ghent as well, where TFP, Tradition, Family and Property, one of the anti-gender movements, has organized an action against abortion, not specifically LGBTQ oriented, but it was against abortion in front of the main cathedral in Ghent, and there were like 10 people holding a protest against abortion, and the very reason why they did that was not because they wanted to convince people to be against abortion. It was because they knew that they would trigger a counter-protest. That they would be able to show to their Polish counterparts, for instance, look at these Western liberal Soros, whatever we're calling them, attacking us and preventing us from having our freedom of expression. That was what the real goal was of that protest. So that's also showing you how this anti-gender movement is treating Belgium. And I think now Yves has a microphone.
But then asked the word first.
Okay.
I think I was first. Thank you. I'm Dan Christian Gattas. I'm the Executive Director of OA Europe, which is the European Intersex Organization, umbrella organization. And I'm really happy that intersex and also trans people were mentioned at some point in this conversation, because I had the feeling that there was sort of like an over prioritization of the other groups of the character of the acronym, which is quite often the case. I also want to thank my colleague who raised the question about the validity of medical opinions, especially if it comes to intersex people who are subjected to IGM, and as you know, that's intersex genital mutilation, which are interventions that are performed without the wish of the person, very often at a very young age, and that are non-vital interventions. And I mean, just to say, Belgium is not the only country where we have these conversations. So also in those countries, except actually maybe for Malta, where we now have bans, and we have countries, 5 countries that now have an IGM ban, which is Malta, Portugal, Germany, Iceland, and Greece, very recently. So you can see that there's a growing trend to actually understand that this is not a medical discussion. And I find it really, really risky, to be honest, to hear on a public panel things like, I think it's not a political conversation, it's a medical conversation now, despite now understanding where you're coming from. But this is also very risky, because this is the argument that is usually given when it comes to political will. And coming back to Malta, one of the most important sentences that Helena Dali, now a Minister for Equality, Commissioner for Equality, said was, Malta got the law because this was about political will. And while democracy means to listen to all stakeholders, the question is, who is a stakeholder here? And I would really question that doctors who have an interest but are not themselves the ones subjected to an intervention that they have not wished for can be stakeholders in the sense that need to be listened to when it comes to the lives of other people. Just imagine what today say about homosexuality. Oh, let's talk with doctors. We're not sure if we should make a law. That would be an outrage, right? We now have trans identities depathologized from the ICT very recently. I think we will come to a point where this will also be an outcry if you would say, let's ask doctors if trans people should get the medical treatment that they need. I really hope we'll come very soon to a point where this is not an issue anymore, where I don't hear people say, let's ask doctors if what to do with intersex children that are healthy. It's just not about fundamental rights if you say that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to specify that if I say it's not a political discussion anymore, that I mean today it's a discussion between politicians and doctors. You understand? It's not a discussion between politicians, because all politicians kind of agree that we need legislation on intersex. And now we are trying to figure out what's the best way to go. And I'm happy that you took some good examples. And of course, we have to talk with everybody. We have to listen to everybody, but I'm very happy that on the point of the political side, we don't have major issues regarding between us, between the politicians, because everybody's convinced we need legislation. So I think this is, as a politician, a very important step.
Okay. Good morning or good midday. I'm an activist from Belgium for almost 30 years. It has been a long journey. We didn't achieve this in one day. I couldn't imagine it when I was 20 that we would arrive today at what we are at the legal side, not yet at the societal side. To say something about the medicalization, etc., I think Belgium is an exception in many ways. We have, as activists, direct entrance to politicians, even if it's necessary to the Prime Minister. So it means it's very easy for us to talk with them and to say what our griefs are, what we want, etc. So it's not that in the Parliament or debates, in the hearings, that we are not listened to, not at all. And about intersex, of course, it were the intersex activists who got the floor and explained what they wanted. There were also doctors, but you have to know that in the last 10 years we talked a lot with doctors behind the scenes, and we've seen them changing their minds. Every time we spoke with them, they were a little bit more in our direction. It was the same on trans issues. They are now fighters for us. The trans doctors in one of the centers in Ghent, they are really fighting against anti-movement. When there is an opinion in a newspaper, they react together with us or alone. So it changed a lot, and today most of the medical world is at our side already. Not all, not perfect, not at all, and we don't have to make laws based on what they want, but on what we want, but we cooperate with them where we can, and we criticize them when we have to. So that's the way on intersex and on trans issues that we can work in a special place, small country as Belgium, and I acknowledge it's an exception in Europe, in the world, but it is what it is. And maybe you can use our doctors to convince some of the other doctors in Europe to say, hey, what's happening there? Well, it's a good example of how we do it and how we changed our minds and how we realized that we have to be, it has to be based on human rights, not on medical things, but on human rights. So that's what's happens now about that intersex discussions and legal gender recognition, etc.
I think I'm very happy that I'm giving the floor to all of you, because it's so much more interesting to have this conversation with you, actually, than just having the conversation between us. But let me just go to the next block of our conversation. The next block is what I called the role of Belgium in Europe. We've seen over the last days, yesterday we had our Deputy Prime Minister, Peter de Sutter, here giving a speech. We have Stefanie as the President of the Belgian Senate here today. Tomorrow the Brussels State Secretary for International Cooperation is going to be to arrive here. So we've seen a lot of presence here of Belgian high-level government officials, which is an important thing, and it's providing some kind of security to the Pride here and so on. But at the same time, I can also be a little bit critical maybe of that, because maybe we're just doing performative actions here. If I look to the embassies who have been paying to organize all of this, I don't see the Belgian tricolor there. So are we actually doing enough as Belgium? Let me give you the floor first to Alexander, because you of course also have you are able to compare with other countries, as you have been following all of this from a European level before.
Well, I think, as we said, and I mean, as was just said in the last remark, Belgium is in many ways an exception, and a good exception in that sense. But it's not the only one. We saw a whole series of speeches yesterday. I mean, I was glad to see. Now, it's of course some of the usual suspects. I mean, we had the Swedish ambassador. I was actually wondering, where's the Finnish ambassador? Maybe, I don't know, Finland might not be represented here in Serbia. I haven't checked that. We had the Dutch embassy. I mean, if we had Luxembourg, that would be another of those usual suspects. I mean, I was happy to see that we had France. 10 or 15 years ago, we might not have had France on this stage. So that's also something which is a new evolution, which is changing. What I mean to say by this is the European Union, it's 27 member states, and
the EU can do some things as EU, but it will never be as powerful as an EU if it doesn't have a majority of member states behind in order to do something. And it's, I mean, when we'll talk about the UN, it's the same. I mean, it's, the institutions are the sum of their member states, and when it allows, there's a dynamic of its own. Now, we'll see it on LGBTIQ issues. It's not an EU competence. A certain number of human rights, which are EU competence, because it roots in the treaties, in the EU treaties, it roots in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and this is where you can draw a certain number of rights and policies that would involve the LGBTIQ community. But in the end, I mean, how does Belgium influence this? Well, I mean, countries like Belgium, by teaming up with others, I think that is the best way in order to set into motion some dynamics which at EU level allow to give a framework. I think, Remy, you will get into this. There are a certain number of recent examples, not least, I mean, Commissioner Dalli was mentioned, but I mean, the communication that she has issued in 2020 about a strategy for LGBTIQ issues, which is the first time ever. So this is probably building on the good examples like the Belgian example. Now again, every reality is a different one. It's not that you take the Belgian example and you transpose it to Greece tomorrow. I mean, it's not going to work like that. But if there is a wider European legal framework, yes, that will apply to anybody who's a member of that organization. Just the way whatever applies for Council of Europe applies to all its members, including Serbia. I was very keen to see that there was a press statement by the UN resident coordinator here a couple of weeks ago when the whole discussion about the Pride and the ban of the march started, where she clearly referred to the fact that Serbia, and it could be another country, but in these circumstances, Serbia has a certain number of commitments when it comes to the right of association, of freedom of expression, etc., and you cannot go, if you sign this, you cannot go against that. So these are some, I think, the examples which show that the international framework can help, but only if those national competence and components actually play the game.
Want to add something to that?
Well, the question was, is Europe doing enough?
Is Belgium doing enough in Europe?
Is Belgium doing enough in Europe? We try to. We try to, but you're always sometimes blocked. And regarding to me, it's kind of frustrating that we are sometimes not fighting alone, but we are always opposed to the unanimity role of countries like Hungary and Poland. So we are working very hard, and of course it's never enough, you know. Are we doing enough? No, of course not. But can we do more? I don't know.
I think it's also a question of persons sometimes that can have a sort of influence. I mean, for instance, I mean, in the Belgian case, I think when the Belgian adopted a certain milestone laws like same-sex marriage and adoption, I guess it was under the prime ministership of Guy Verhofstadt, who then became a very leading figure at European lawmakers level as well. And I think these are, so sometimes that's how also good national examples can come up to the higher level and can serve as a role model for others. So it's also those kind of pushes that do help.
And also, it doesn't mean that if you can't do it step by step, it's not enough, you know. Like in 2024, Belgium will be the president of the European Union, and so we form a troika together with Spain and Hungary. And to prepare that presidency, of course, I have a lot of discussions with the ambassador from Hungary. You can imagine these discussions aren't that friendly and nice. You can also imagine that I don't silence. I say very kindly to Mr. Ambassador that we have a serious problem at the Senate in Belgium with what they are doing in his country. And so he takes that message, I hope, with him. But then I say to the ambassador, well, I cannot negotiate with you anymore. No. We try to find a diplomatical way. And sometimes it's not easy. You really have to balance on a very small chords. Because you want to have your saying, but you have to work together. but these countries who are facing you and you are not thinking the same way as you do.
What is comforting, though, is that over the years, and especially since the implementation of the Lisbon Treaty, what matters in the EU and the way decisions are taken, I mean, it's not any longer unanimity, but in very few cases, but it is qualified majority. And luckily, 2 countries, I mean, I'm not naming anyone here, but 2 countries cannot block 27 from moving ahead. Whether they're in the Troika or not, and that's the good news. In the past, it would have been different.
Yeah, well, I'm going to name one of these countries, Hungary, because I was going to give one example of what Belgium actually did. And we all know that the regime of Viktor Orban has introduced an anti-propaganda law, a Russian-style anti-propaganda law last year. And yeah, Belgium was the leader in the advocacy against this. It was the former Foreign Minister Sophie Wilmès who made sure that this came to the agenda of the Foreign Council and the European Council, that it was in the end also put on the European Council's agenda for the first time in the history of the European Council. An LGBTIQ+ topic was discussed on in the European Council, and this led to also the first time that there was an infringement procedure started by the European Commission. Last month we had the announcement by the European Commission that for the first time ever the Commission is going to the Court of Justice on something related to LGBTQ about the anti-propaganda law. So also member states have this leadership to put things on the agenda, and that's something that Belgium, that's one specific example where Belgium did very well, for instance, and that's where I hope that we can engage much more other like-minded countries to take up this leadership, not just to support you during Pride, but to take leadership when things go and when there are backlashes in certain countries.
Yeah. I would like to use the example from hate speech. Now in Belgium we are working on legislation to condemn more hate speech. I think in my opinion it's horrible that you can be condemned for racism, but to be condemned for homophobia, that's quite difficult. And so the Minister of Justice, but you can handle hate speech at the national level, but it would be much better if you could handle it on the European level. So the Minister of Justice talked with Ursula von der Leyen to ask her to really start on working on hate speech, and she took that by heart. And she's trying to make legislation to make hate speech really to be condemned as much severe as racism. So only because 2 people find each other, trying to find a way on a legal level, yeah, if we could make that progress in Europe, it would be nice.
Yes, and yeah, that leads me to the last parts of our conversation is here today. As basically, as Europe, as the European Union, are they doing enough? We've seen the backlashes in Poland. We've seen the backlashes in Hungary. We've seen how slow the Commission has been reacting to them. So my first question is then, are we doing enough? If we would have prevented Orban from doing this in the first place 5 years ago, we wouldn't be here at this stage.
I think we should look here at what are the dynamics at stake. I mean, you've mentioned the infringement procedures, etc. Finally, things are taking up, and you're asking why wasn't this happening 5 years ago? Well, I mean, one thing is countries mobilizing within the EU. I mean, on the model of some, and some would pull the others with them, like we just discussed about Belgium or others. But I think we shouldn't forget that every country is ruled by a political leadership in every country. And there are political families in Europe. And until not that long ago, the Hungarian Prime Minister was the member of one of the European political families. And that, of course, I mean, which was the Christian Democrats, the EPP. And that makes it, I mean, a little bit more difficult to go against your own party buddies. I mean, it was easier to point at Poland because it wasn't any longer one of the traditional main European political parties that was in power in Warsaw. So I think this is also where the dynamics are, and this is where it brings it back to politics, and where these discussions within political groups and political families are extremely important. And that's also where you can move up. And that's, again, when you have a certain number of voices within those parties that speak out, which has happened increasingly within the EPP, for instance, where it became, at some point, very difficult to cope with somebody like the Hungarian Prime Minister.
So, and we are all talking about politics right now and to influence politicians and to talk with them. But I think the other thing we must do as Belgian people is to help grassroots organizations. I think this is one of the main reasons, of course, that I'm here as well, to talk at the level of politicians, but also to help the grassroots organizations. I said to you before that we politicians, and Yves described that, we talk with grassroots organizations, with rainbow houses, very, very regularly. And we take our information that we receive from them with us to the parliament. It would be nice that we can have the same relationship with grassroots organizations here that can have the same relationship with their politicians.
Yeah, maybe as a last question before I give back the floor to the audience. Specifically related to this, or I don't see where. Oh, there. Okay.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. I just wanted to jump on that. Hi, Vera from Berlin, Germany. Because you're talking about grassroots and also jumping on the medical discussion, I feel like the A in the LGBTQIA+ is barely addressed. Asexuality or the A spectrum is still often classified as a mental illness. I hear very little talks and also lawmaking, for example, for single-parent adoption. And I'm just wondering, on EU level or also Belgium level, if there's anything done, and if not, I would like to give you a very strong tap on the shoulder to also listen to a grassroots and activist group in that area. Thank you.
There is another question, or where? There? There. Here, down here, yes, sorry. Yes.
Here you go. Hey, my name is Hassan Hanini and I'm from Finland, so someone from Finland here. And I'm the head of our new organization named Burak from Muslim and Muslim background, LGBTIQ in Finland, and also I'm an expert on honor-related violence. My question is about, are you thinking that Europe in general, in one box if I can put it like that, living kind of crisis identity, who we are, who we want to be. And this is probably what lead to this kind of situation and what we see here in Belgrade and other countries. My second question, and if it's yes with this, what are the strategy or what are the plan to face this kind of identity crisis that we see it here probably? Because this is what I think. My second question is about religious group. Most of Europe countries want to show that we are like the politics are far from the religious kind of spectrum, but in the reality, the religious people are gaining more and more space in the public and are using certain constitutional law about the freedom of speak to be against the LGBT community. What are the strategies to work with kind of religious group in general? Thanks.
Well, I think first of all, thanks for that, and I mean it's good to see that the organization you represent is here with us on Pride. I think if we go a little bit also, I mean I think that's one of the intentions to talk a bit about the wider world as well. What I see at the level of the UN, for instance, is that religious considerations come into the game quite a lot, and they tend to come into the game usually. Well, there are two main streams. One is the Vatican that comes in not always in a very constructive way when it comes to the policy areas we're talking about at UN level, and the other one, it's the organization of the Islamic Conference or the countries that are part of that. And again, it's the justification of religion to go against LGBTIQ groups. On your question about European identity, I have the feeling as Europe, as whether this is the European Union or the European continent as such, I think we're pretty aware of what we are and where we want to go and what we've tried to build since World War II in terms of a continent that is, well, I mean, the latest war in Ukraine shows that this is never an easy step, but that it's a continent that aims at living in peace, neighboring states with each other compared to what it used to be in the past, but also in an overall framework of societies that are ruled by the rule of law and the respect of individual freedoms and liberties. So I think in that sense, we're very clear as to where we're heading. I think the discussion this morning showed that the model is not perfect and that there are a lot of flaws and backdrops sometimes, etc. But at least, I mean, the objective is very clear, and I think the idea, the way we want to set the means in order to achieve those objectives are out there as well. So when you talk about an identity crisis, I think that deserves also a little bit further of a discussion. I don't know exactly how you want to relate this to the LGBTIQ issue, etc. What is sure is that the conservative forces that we see in action around the world, and you see them a lot in the United States as well, you see them in fundamental Islamic regimes as well, you see them in authoritarian regime across the globe. I mean, Russia is one example, but you see it elsewhere as well. These guys managed to unite quite well and instrumentalize religion in a way which is, I think, not fair to religion, and it's definitely not fair to the people who believe and practice religion, which usually is a message of peace and a message of tolerance. I don't see much of tolerance and peace and acceptation of others in the narrative that these guys do have. So I think there's just as much, I mean, I said before, it's important to explain, to be kind. That doesn't mean that you have to be stupid. So I guess these guys actually mobilized very well. It's just fair enough to mobilize and be visible as well on our side. And there again, I mean, activism helps in order to remind also those who lead that they should go in the right direction.
Yes.
Can I give an example on how we handle the religious part? I don't know if you were here when we talked about, let's say, the informal political group we have. And this informal political group, we call it an inter-religious dialogue with all the different religions we have in Belgium. And so we have many, many meetings with all the different, let's say, churches and with the heads of the churches, Orthodox, Christian, and so on and so on. And then we negotiate a kind of manifest, let's say, with 10 points. And really, we agreed on working on these 10 points together. And it means dialogue, cooperating, And it was a very official moment when we all took and we all noted that manifest. And then now we see each other, let's say, with the informal group. Let's say, well, of course, with COVID, it was very difficult. And we see each other twice a year, where we discuss the different issues in religion regarding to rainbow community. So just the thing that we started a dialogue, that the heads of churches really came forward on the fact that they started a dialogue with us, it is a very important step. And I remember then the moment we all came together and we had a press conference, it was during COVID time, and I had for everybody a rainbow mask. And I divided those rainbow masks to the churches as well. And you saw them like hesitating a bit, and then, okay, they all put on the mask. And if you saw that image, you see all the different churches with the rainbow mask, with the manifest, together with all the political parties. That's a big step they took. And so now, together with the informal group, we are every time working on that, every time asking which progress you made on that part, on this project, and so on and so on. So it was important. I think it started one half a year ago, 2 years ago. So it's quite recent.
I would say one should imagine that churches and church representatives would be very happy with the rainbow, actually, right? It's usually a sign of the sky, and it usually calls for better weather after the rain. So.
Yes. Well, with this, we could go on, I think, for 2 more hours, but I'll keep you. I don't want to keep you from your lunch, so we can discuss way more during lunch or afterwards during this week as well. I would like to thank everybody here in the audience for their participation. I would like to thank my 2 panelists, the President of the Belgian Senate, Stefanie Doze, and Special Advisor to the Presidency of the UN General Assembly, Alexander Stutzman, to take part in this. And see you all soon, and of course, happy Pride.